everyone, welcome back to my channel. Now you know I have always wanted to do more reviews on this channel and give my thoughts and perspectives and opinions on games not only current but also in the past, games that I've played and I've liked or are playing for the first time. That might be an older game that I just haven't gotten around to yet, and thought I'd give my thoughts in a more in-depth view on it than I normally would. And so today I thought I'd go over Shenmue 1 and give my thoughts and impressions of it. Of my gaming experiences, I never knew about the Shenmue series at all. Much of this was due to me personally never owning a Dreamcast or even hearing about anything about a Dreamcast or the Shenmue series until I was an adult. No one around me had a Dreamcast. Nobody around me even hinted at this game called Shenmue, and so I just never heard of it. I was first introduced to the idea of this Shenmue series from two very famous YouTubers. The one is Adam Korlick, and the other is the Happy Console Gamer, both of which have encouraged others to play the game. They've given high praise to it. They said how what a good series it was. Even though it might be dated and things, it still was a good series. And so, you know, being somebody who wants to discover sort of the past and where some games got their start, I thought, hey, maybe I should start thinking about that and maybe give it a try. Especially when I found out that the Shenmue series has been credited with pioneering the way for games like Grand Theft Auto, which, as many of you know, is one of my favorite, all-time favorite games. I just absolutely love Grand Theft Auto. And more importantly, one of my new favorites, the Yakuza franchise. Very much takes its roots from Shenmue. So, with those in particular, I decided that I needed to definitely get my hands on Shenmue and give it a try for myself. And for this review, I want to just let you know that I am not reviewing it on the original hardware. I don't own one, still don't own a Dreamcast, and I never owned an original copy of Shenmue. However, I will be reviewing the re-release, or the port, if you will, of the original Dreamcast version to the PlayStation 4, which is the Shenmue HD Collection, which contains minor upgrades and some fixes that the developer has used. As a funny addendum to all of this, I have played Yakuza Kiwami, which is the first Yakuza game in the series, before I played Shenmue, which may have not been the best idea in hindsight. You see, Yakuza has taken what its predecessor, like Shenmue, have done and made it better, and with the new re-release has made it more graphically appealing and better updates and better quality of life measures, and you know, it's just added such a gripping, responsive story with excellent responsive controls and great gameplay and fantastic music. It's like a wonderful package, and I've really fallen in love with that Yakuza franchise. Unfortunately, from the gate, I have to say this: the re-release of the Shenmue 1 did not live up to this sort of ideal that I had from playing the original Yakuza game. And so it was not a great way to start my journey into Shenmue. It was almost like an unrealistic expectation, because I thought, if this is what the Yakuza series is like, then Shenmue must be so close to that. It must be so similar. And it is in some ways, as we'll get to, but it's a very different game and very different feeling of a game than what you get from the Yakuza franchise. But, as I say, once you kind of get through those differences and realize that Shenmue is a different game, and especially for me in that case, I was able to get onto it and get into the flow eventually into the Shenmue series, and didn't actually mind it at all. I also want to say that everything I'm expressing in this review is my opinion and my opinion alone. I know I shouldn't have to state that, because I'm only an N of one person giving their thoughts and opinions on something. Doesn't mean that you have to take everything I say to complete to heart and attack me or something in the comments if you don't agree. The best part about having opinions and having different likes and dislikes is that it makes it a little more interesting, and I'm more than happy to engage with people and talk about stuff in the comments, because you know what, I might have taken something the wrong way when I was playing the game, or it might have hit me the wrong way, or I wasn't in the right mood, and so I made a note or jotted a note down, and that made its way to this review. And you know, if you think that was unfair, by all means let me know. But I'm always, it's important to have these discussions, and I'm all for it. But just remember, we all have different likes and dislikes, and all those different likes and opinions make the world a better place. And we have to learn to get along with each other. So with that, let's dive into this Dreamcast classic and go on quite a surprising journey. Shenmue is an action-adventure game series created and produced and directed by Yi Hazuki in 1999 and published by Sega for the Dreamcast. Shenmue is an open-world game that contains brawler aspects, some role-playing aspects, and some life simulation elements. What was revolutionary for the time was the inclusion of day and night cycles and systems, variable weather effects, quick-time events, non-player characters having daily schedules, and most importantly, having interactive elements like vending machines, arcades, or mini-games built within the game. So it was like a game within a game, concepts that up to this point in gaming history really never shone through or made it anywhere close to what Shenmue was doing. The story follows the teenage martial artist Ryo Hazuki as he travels through the 1980s in the greatness of Japan to pursue his father's killer. Interestingly, Shenmue 1 and 2 both sold very well, with Shenmue 1 selling approximately 1.2 million copies and became the Dreamcast's fourth best-selling game. It is so sad that the game, for the longest time, so this is Shenmue 1 I'm talking about here, was exclusive to the Dreamcast. So it was released there, and there were no ports to any other sort of platform. And so it is with great gratitude where I want to now thank Sega and the publishers and the writers to allow Shenmue and the HD collection to be released and re-released on modern hardware. I want to thank them and applaud them, because I think this is very important to not only keeping gaming history alive, but the preservation of these games alive as well. So thank you so much, Sega. When I first booted up Shenmue on the PlayStation 4 and saw the graphics of the introductory cutscene, I immediately had the stupidest grin on my face. The graphics instantly transported me back to the late 90s and the early 2000s video game era, which, for my age now, being in my mid-30s, is something that gave me such a nostalgic feel, and definitely hit me in the feels when I seen it for the first time. In a year that was chock full of fantastic releases, such as Donkey Kong 64, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, Gran Turismo, Soul Calibur, Chrono Cross, and of course Tomb Raider, Shenmue had excellent graphics that were on par or exceeded many of the games at that time. Although graphics are not everything, many of the textures and artistic styles utilized during this time period can most definitely be seen as dated and jarring to some more modern type gamers. And Shenmue unfortunately is no exception to that. Personally, I did not find the graphics to be horrible, as I do think that provides it a sense of charm and character to the game that I think really puts you into that sort of aspect in gaming culture for the time when it was released back in the early or the late 90s. I think that was an excellent choice, and it's great. Personally, I do think though at times there were some unusual clipping through of objects or certain rendered backgrounds, mainly sort of like when you're walking down hallways or or corridors or certain buildings at times, you could definitely tell that they were aged. The types of graphics used there and the textures that were utilized there were aged. You could tell. However, I do think this is a decent port into the modern era, and think that the graphics, which have been cleaned up from the original, generally speaking, are pretty good for that time period. Since I do not want this to be a bunch of spoilers, and generally speaking, when I play a game, I don't want to have it spoiled if it's being reviewed. So generally speaking, all the footage and the story that I'm going to talk about are all in the beginning part of the game, so that it's not going to spoil the ending or the middle or any of that, so you can still enjoy the game for yourself. But I do want to make it as spoil-free as possible. And I also will keep the story part brief. Set in 1986 Japan, Ryo Hazuki, a teenage martial artist, returns to his family dojo to witness a confrontation between his father and a man of Chinese origins. The intruder demands that Ryo's father give him a mysterious stone artifact called the Dragon Mirror. Once the Chinese martial artist and his men find the Dragon Mirror, Ryo's father is killed for his past misgivings when he was in China, and dies in Ryo's arms. This then starts Ryo down a rabbit hole of investigations that leads him to a martial arts master who will help Ryo find out the men responsible for killing his father. For me personally, the story was extremely gripping and compelling in the first part of the game. As the game continued and you were doing more mundane day-to-day investigations and moving around town, there were parts of the story that seemed to lull. And you'd go through large segments even though you were inadvertently, by talking to different NPCs and getting clues and things, you were progressing through the story and getting information, but there were times where the information seemed to trickle through and wasn't as enriching and engrossing and continuous, so it was more of a broken up story, at least I found anyways. And I also found that some parts of the game, especially in the later part where we'll get to, where you're driving a forklift, it just seemed to be completely absent altogether. And so, I don't know, I found that at times very bothersome for me. However, once Ryo meets his martial arts master, the story does pick up again in the later parts and becomes really good again. In many respects, I found the entire story in the first game to be more like a prologue than an actual game. So what I mean by that is, I found that most of the story that you would have gotten here in this full game of Shenmue 1, in a regular RPG, for example, which I play a lot of, would have been a prologue chapter. Because if you really cut down the story, and just the story element, not the gameplay, just the story, it would be like a prologue to give you that background that you need to understand what's going on in the context of why your character, your main character, is doing the things that they're doing. And that's what this felt like to me, more like a prologue than an actual story, and an actual summation and giving you ideas of what was going on. Because I actually left out I left the game with more questions and answers, which is great. And I do know that there are more games to play, like Shenmue 2 and 3, and so you can maybe get some answers there. But I thought that there was too many unanswered questions, and that they should have given you a little bit more detail there, and a little more flushing out of the story, so that you could still have those hooks to bring you into the next game to continue the series, but also just have a more satisfying parts of the story there to give you more. I just found was missing some of the meat and potatoes there for the story. Other than that, though, I thought it was quite a decent story. I thought it was overall, as I said, needed more, but generally speaking, it did have an overall gripping story elements that brought you in, that made me want to learn more. And I think that's great for any good story and any storytelling. The game starts you with controlling the teenage martial artist pupil Ryo Hazuki as he investigates his father's murder. Through the exploration of the rich open world of Japan and its various cities and townships, Ryo also will be searching for clues, examining objects, and talking to NPCs to gain information about who was responsible for his father's death and where to find them. The aspect of exploring the towns and its citizens was by far the highlight of the game. There were so many funny dialogue options and responses that NPCs gave that just make me laugh so much, as these conversations are so dated and have very weird context to them. But in some cases it also helped with the immersion of the story as well. I also love the idea of Ryo's girlfriend moving to Canada. And I love that part so much. And it stood out very clearly to me because I am a Canadian. And seeing Canada represented was just such a weird thing to see here. And felt very out of place for some reason, but it was nice that it was there. And I was proud to be Canadian and that Ryo's girlfriend was moving to Canada. As odd as that may sound. I also found the various characters, at least to me, were hiding something and had much more to them that they were not revealing. And that extra bit of like reserve in the characters, as if they knew more but didn't want to say more to Ryo, kept me immersed and gave me a little bit of extra intrigue into the mystery and the plot of the game. Now, the voice acting for many of the characters also seemed very off, and it's right off the bat from the very first introductory cutscene. You can see that something's a little off here. I found the voices were muffled and it was very hard to hear at times, the clearness of the dialogue. It sounded like they had paper filters or something in front of their mouths, so that when they were giving their lines, it was all muffly. It was very strange, and I definitely think that was the weakest part of the game. And I do think that Sega should try to fix that in the future. At times, I did not find the fetch quests to be, I don't know, I don't want to be harsh, but I found some of them to be very repetitive. You know, I found, like in the beginning they weren't. In the beginning they were very, you know, they're fresh, they're new, and this is the first time you're doing them. But as some of them, as you progress in the game, many of these fetch quests started to be repetitive, and you started to see the same type of items or same type of event that you're doing being replayed over and over again. And some of this also was due to the in-game clock, which is revolutionary for the time, but because there was an in-game clock, some quests had you waiting for specific times and dates with nothing really to do to either advance your story or side story elements. You just were waiting around. However, during these downtimes, you are to fill your period of time with practice fighting in the parking lots to gain higher proficiency in each martial arts skill that you have to get better attacks. And also during this time where you're waiting around is the greatest time to go and explore the towns and collect items and you know, pass the time by buying food or raffle tickets or audio cassettes and capsule toys, which I have to say, in the beginning I was super excited for and dove right in and really enjoyed it. However, as I went to the middle part of the game, and especially in the later part of the game, I found it to be repetitive. And there was not enough variety in the various capsule toys that you were getting. Because I would find like I'd get the same toy back to back to back in some cases, and that really bothered me. And yes, that's probably realistic, of course, because in the real world that could happen to you. But I don't know, I just found it annoying when you get, you know, 4 or 5 in a row that are the same. Again, just bad luck perhaps, but that bothered me in that case. The game has a lot of mini games for Ryo to explore, such as darts, or my personal favorite was the Sega Arcade. And so when I had these downtimes where you're waiting for a certain date or time, I'd often fill it with playing various Sega classics, and really enjoyed it. I felt like these little side distractions that I'm talking about here were necessary add-ins to allow you for a better gameplay experience. Or otherwise, you'd just be sitting around, dicking around, doing nothing. So I'm happy that they were included. However, even with all of these extra side things for you to do and collect, I did find there were pacing issues, especially in the middle act of the game, where I felt like I was just going through the motions and the day-to-day grind and not really feeling like I was progressing anywhere. And you know, both in terms of the character development, but even the storylines, I just felt like I wasn't going anywhere, and that goes back to that lulling aspect I was talking about. The one aspect of gameplay that I did like was the fighting system, and it seemed to me very similar to Virtua Fighter. The brawler aspect really shone through at those periods of time. However, I wish they were more often like they are in the Yakuza series, because that was my initial thought, that there'd be a lot of fighting sequences, and there are a good amount in fighting quick time event stuff, but I don't know. I just felt like because he's a martial artist, Ryo is, and that there should be a lot more. Should be a much more focus and emphasis on that. And again, it might just be the pacing of the story, but for me, I just didn't find there to be enough of it, at least for me. The other issue that I had with the battling system is that some of the control inputs didn't seem to be responsive or stiff, especially when moving Ryo around or when you're doing quick time events when you're fighting or brawling. It just, certain moves and combos wouldn't work, or they were stiff, or there was like a delay in the response between the controller and the game input, which I don't know, it sometimes rubbed me the wrong way and got me really frustrated. This also was an issue when it came to the quick time events, where I would literally be pounding the button that they were saying and it still wouldn't register, or it would be like just a second off or some weird input lag problem, and I would miss it, have to restart over again. And that, at times, was super frustrating for me. At least, you know, not everybody, that doesn't bother some people, but for me it really bothered me quite a bit. Although, to be honest, I know a lot of people hate QuickTime events in general. In this game, though, I didn't mind them, even though I was frustrated with the buttons not registering at times. I did find them important and needed in some cases in this, and would be the best way of achieving certain goals that you were doing in the game. So that made sense. I enjoyed filling out Ryo's journal pages. As you progress through the game, you have a little notebook that Ryo has, and as you go through and you talk to people and do different things, you start to see the blank pages filling up. But what was neat is, as you flip through the journal, there are pages, and sometimes 3, 4, 5 pages that are blank. And you're going, what the heck did I miss there? And that was so enjoyable to see, that there were other options and dialogue options and people that I didn't meet that I could have, that might have added more to the story or might have done whatever, and that gives you, as a player, a lot of agency and control over the story and how you play it. It also helped with replay value, which I really enjoyed and thought this was something that was revolutionary for that time. The last thing that I want to talk about, and I think might be divisive among some gamers who've played the original Shenmue, is the whole forklift minigame. As this is one of the main ways you can earn money in the game. As I suggested in the intro of this game, it's sort of like a life simulation, where there's an in-game clock, and there's different, you know, day and night cycles, and you have to do various tasks throughout the day at certain times of the day, and one of those is being filled with a part-time job, just like you would in the real world. To some people, this monotony of driving a forklift and dropping boxes on pre-filled out zones on the map to be very, very stupid and draining. However, oddly enough, I found it quite therapeutic, as the mundaneness, coupled with the goal of trying to determine how I was going to avenge my father's death by gaining enough money to get to Hong Kong, was in some ways fulfilling, especially when I attained that goal. And I actually didn't mind driving the forklift around. I thought it was quite, overall, enjoyable. I personally found the music within the game to be alright. Sometimes in certain parts of the city, for example, the music was very monotonous and mechanical. And I didn't like that at all. It actually bothered my ears greatly. However, there are other parts of the game, especially action sequences, where there was such an upbeat and like sort of like 80s sort of grunge mixed with rock and roll, like excellent beats that got you really pumped. And I enjoyed those parts. And I found that they did add to the aesthetic and the flavor of the game and the characters that I was going after in the story at that time. So I guess all in all, what I'm getting at is that the music is a hit or miss, at least for me. Some parts I liked, some parts I didn't, and I guess at times it was context dependent. So, my overall concluding thoughts on the first Shenmue game is that it is a really great Dreamcast classic that definitely captures the 1980 aesthetic of Japan and the culture of that time. Combined with the graphical capabilities found during the 90s, I do think that if you're interested in gaming history and want to see where a lot of modern games like the Yakuza series got their initial starts and ideas from, playing this game would be an awesome place to start, so long as you understand some of the caveats that I have presented within this review. Things like the odd story pacing, things like odd non-responsive controls or QuickTime events. I also think for new gamers to the series need to understand this simple fact. You cannot take the game seriously, especially when it comes to the in-game dialogue. Yes, it's dated. Yes, it could be seen as offensive, certain things that are said in the game. But all in all, you have to take it not seriously and just take it for what it is and just kind of go with it and enjoy it. And take it as a joke and sort of laugh at some of the things that are said, because it's so campy and so weirdly, how they phrase things, it's so odd and weird. So I think if you take it from that point of view, you'll enjoy the game a lot more. Now, I overall enjoyed the game and definitely appreciated and got to see where so many great ideas in terms of world building and the open world lives of NPCs having schedules and things got its start. And I really appreciate and immensely thanks so much Sega for releasing this game when they did and pioneering some of this stuff. I think it's great. And without them, we might not have had some of the game experiences that we have now, or franchises that we have now, because they were inspired by the stuff done here. I do think that the Shenmue 1 was certainly a game that was ahead of its time and very ambitious. However, playing this in 2021, as I did back in August of 2021, it definitely gave me some great nostalgic feelings for the past, and I certainly recommend this to any modern gamer, as I do think it's still relevant, and even with its flaws, I do think you should give it a try, even if it's a quick try. I don't think anybody has to complete it 100% or play through the whole story, but just play through, at least some of it, just to have an experience and get the flavor of not only the time period in gaming history, but also the flavor of the 80s, man. It's alive and well there, and I definitely enjoyed seeing that. However, if you can get past all of those oddities and drawbacks, I think you're going to enjoy and have a great overall good game experience. It's not going to be the best or fantastic, because it is dated, based on what we have today with controls and the way games are developed today. But overall, it was a good experience, and I did enjoy it overall, and definitely recommend people to at least play it. So, thank you so much, guys, for watching, and I hope you found this review enjoyable. Please, like, comment, subscribe, and all of that stuff, and I'll see you guys later on. Bye-bye for now.